The president says he's for the middle class. How have they done under his presidency? Not so well.
A new poll shows a tight race in 3 battleground states.
Nice to meet you. Hey, can I call you Joe? Okay, good.
Also today, highlights from past vice presidential debates, a look at the moderator's role, and the challenges for the candidates tonight. I'm Megan Lieberman, live from the New York Times newsroom. A New York Times CBS News Quinnipiac poll out this morning shows gains for Mitt Romney, but surprising strengths for the president. Michael Shear's on the line from Washington with more. So, Mike, we have this new poll out in 3 swing states this morning, Virginia, Colorado, and Wisconsin. And we see movement in the head-to-head toward Mitt Romney, but not dramatic movement, right?
Right. I mean, basically what these polls show is that race between Mitt Romney and President Obama has definitely tightened. Mitt Romney has gained some strength in a lot of the areas that we had seen weakness for many months leading up to that first debate last week. He's improved on a lot of those areas, questions of leadership, the sort of passion that his folks have for his own candidacy. But it hasn't fundamentally altered the dynamic of the race. It's really still maybe a tighter version of what we had been seeing over the last few weeks.
So we're seeing sort of a few point difference between the candidates in these states, right? It's like 5 points in Virginia?
That's right. Virginia's among the 3 state polls that we had. Virginia was the president's biggest lead at 5 points. He leads 3 in Wisconsin, and then it's essentially a dead heat in Colorado. Those are tighter numbers than what we've seen, say, over a couple of weeks ago when the president really seemed to have much more significant outside the margin of error leads in some of these battleground states. He doesn't seem to have that much anymore. There's been some other polls also that essentially have shown the same thing. That seems to be an indication that Mitt Romney did pick up some real support in the wake of that good debate performance.
Surprisingly, what's turning out to be sort of a strong suit for the president is the economy, a relatively strong suit.
Right. That's really actually the most significant thing that we saw in the polls last night and that I wrote about in today's paper is that the economy, perceptions about the economy really are his firewall, or the thing that's buttressing his campaign. People are much more inclined to say that they think the economy is improving both nationally and in their own state. They are much more inclined to think that the president is doing a good job at handling the economy, and that kind of more than anything else is giving him an edge still.
And there's still some challenges for Mitt Romney on some of the other personal qualities besides leadership, like the who cares about me questions and the who cares about the middle class questions. And we're getting some sense of a hangover from that 47% tape, aren't we?
Right, and that comes both from the numbers and anecdotally. In the numbers, you really, when the question is asked, who cares about, which of these 2 candidates do you think cares about the middle class? Which of these 2 candidates do you think understands your plight? The president has big leads in all of these states, a little less so in Colorado, which has been a real troublesome place for the president, but certainly in Wisconsin and Virginia, big leads on those questions. I talked to one of the voters in Virginia that we polled, and you call back these folks, and this one woman really kind of in real sort of passionate way said that the 47% comments that Mitt Romney had made about and recorded, and that were secretly recorded and then shown about the 47% being dependent on government and all of that that really was the thing that drove her to support the president.
So, Mike, how do these numbers set the table for the debate tonight?
Well, look, I mean, I think what they've done is they've heightened the pressure on both Paul Ryan and Vice President Biden. If the race dynamics had been what it was, say, 2 weeks ago, with the president really showing big leads in all of these battleground states, I think there would have been a sense that the vice presidential debate wasn't going to be all that critical. The fact that it's tightening, and that perhaps the momentum is in a direction where it may even tighten more over the course of the next week, it really puts the pressure on these guys, both not to screw up, but also to score some points. I mean, the vice president really needs to push back to show the supporters of the Democratic ticket that they're not going to just take some of this criticism from the rival camp. And I think so there's pressure on both of these guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Later today, all eyes will be on Danville, Kentucky for the one and only vice presidential debate. Generally, debates featuring just the running mate have had a minimal debate impact on the race, but that doesn't mean they don't offer memorable moments.
Vice presidential candidates, important though the job is, are not very well known to voters. The single debate, one each year, held between vice presidential candidates can go a long way toward helping voters decide which ticket they want to vote for. In 1988, George H.W. Bush chose as his vice president a very young, untested senator from Indiana, Dan Quayle. And when the boyish-looking Quayle appeared against his opponent, Lloyd Bentsen of the Democratic Party, Quayle compared himself to the Democratic nominee in 1960, John F. Kennedy, and Lloyd Bentsen was ready with a response.
I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
In 1976, the very first vice presidential debate was held between Bob Dole, a Republican, and Walter Mondale, a Democrat. In the course of the debate, Bob Dole made a controversial remark about the Democratic Party and 20th century wars.
Very good issue, any more than the war in Vietnam would be, or World War II, or World War I, or the war in Korea. All Democrat wars.
In 1992, H. Ross Perot, the Texas billionaire, mounted one of the most powerful and effective third-party candidacies in modern American history. His choice for vice president, very unorthodox, was a Vietnam War hero, Admiral James Stockdale.
Who am I? Why am I here?
Stockdale was an impressive and admirable figure.
I'm not a politician, everybody knows that.
A true war hero, but he didn't necessarily look like someone who was ready to hold national political office. In 2008, Sarah Palin's handlers discovered that when Palin was rehearsing for the debates, she kept stumbling over her opponent's name and called Senator Joseph Biden, "Oh Biden," confusing him with Obama. Governor Palin came up with an unorthodox solution to that at the very beginning of their debate.
Nice to meet you. Hey, can I call you Joe? Okay, good. Thanks.
No election was ever won because of a vice presidential nominee, but some may have been lost because of them. The debates are the testing grounds in which vice presidential nominees have to prove that the person they're supporting at the top of the ticket made the right choice in selecting the person who's one heartbeat away from the nation's highest office.
While key moments from the debates may be unscripted, a huge amount of planning goes into them. George Farr is the founder of a group called Open Debates that calls for more transparency in the rules that govern the candidates and the moderator. So George, there was a lot of controversy about Jim Lehrer's role in the last debate and a lot of criticism of it, but you thought it was great. Why?
Well, previous formats that the Commission on Presidential Debates has employed have been extremely stilted and weakened. They really were glorified bipartisan news conferences where the candidates were essentially able to deploy a series of memorized sound bites to fit these 30 or 60-second response slots. And we were fiercely critical of these previous kind of formats. But I have to say, the debate that was held last week was groundbreaking. For the first time ever, there was a substantial amount of time allowed for each candidate after the question was asked to actually have a discussion. And so Jim Lehrer's role, unlike previous debates, was essentially to withdraw himself from the debate, to allow the candidates to go at each other and to minimize the role he played. That being said, I think he could have done a substantially better job. He only got to 5 of his 6 questions and the candidates kind of walked a little bit all over him. But it was an absolutely groundbreaking debate compared to history because never before have we seen the candidates talk to each other in this kind of way.
But do you not think that the moderator should have some journalistic role beyond teeing up the subject? Should they not offer follow-up questions? Should they not push back on either factual inaccuracies or inconsistencies in the candidate statements?
I think you'd like a format where you allow the candidates to actually have a debate. In the past, the candidates were prohibited from even talking to each other, from asking each other questions, from deviating from very, very specific scripts. So you don't want to interfere with the capacity for the candidates to go at each other, and you don't want to make the moderator that significant. But it is a delicate balancing act. You do want a strong moderator that's going to enforce time restrictions, that's going to ask follow-up questions to encourage greater discussion, and call out every now and then on the candidates when they are really deviating from the truth. And precisely because Jim failed to do some of those components, again, a very challenging debate structure, he missed his final question. In other words, the country was deprived of a critical subject matter being discussed in our most important public forum because the candidates were able to toss him aside and venture forward in a manner they saw fit.
There's been a little bit of a flap about tonight's moderator, Martha Raddatz, a story about how President Obama actually went to her first wedding many years ago. She's now divorced from her ex-husband. He was a friend of the ex-husband. What do you think about that? Is that an issue? Should that be an issue?
Absolutely not, and for the following reasons. The organization that runs our presidential debates is called the Commission on Presidential Debates. It's a private corporation that was created by the Republican and Democratic parties. So every 4 years, the candidates meet with the commission behind closed doors with their lawyers, and they collaborate in crafting the debate that we're going to see. They collaborate in devising the structure, including vetting all the moderators and deciding who's going to moderate the presidential debates. So Martha Raddatz was selected only with the blessing of the Romney campaign. It is duplicitous for Republicans now to criticize the commission or the actual moderator for having some sort of political bias when the Romney campaign previously blessed the selection.
Now, the commission, of course, denies that they allow the campaigns to be involved in this at all. What is the basis for saying that they do?
Well, we have copies of some of the actual contracts that the Republican and Democratic nominees have negotiated behind closed doors. And by nominees, I mean their actual lawyers. There are 35-page documents that dictate everything in the presidential debates from the structure standpoint, from as trivial as the heights of the podiums and the temperatures in the auditoriums, to critical things like requiring that all town hall questions be pre-screened by the moderator, prohibiting the candidates from talking to each other, and of course, excluding all third-party voices. These documents that are signed by the two campaigns and are absolutely implemented by the commission and concealed by the commission are testament to just how much control the actual campaigns exert over the process.
So, George, how would total transparency work? What would be the process for choosing moderators, for choosing formats, for choosing ground rules?
Well, once upon a time, we actually had a fantastic sponsor. The League of Women Voters used to run our presidential debates, and they were our voice, the voice of the American people in the negotiating room. In 1984, for example, the Republican Democratic nominees vetoed 80 of the proposed moderators for the presidential debates. The League didn't just take this and forget about it. They held a press conference and lambasted the campaigns for trying to get rid of difficult questions. If you fast forward 4 years later, in 1988, the campaigns negotiated the first ever secret contract and said to the League, implement this. The League said, are you kidding me? They released the contract, held a press conference, and accused the campaigns of perpetrating a fraud on the American people. We need a sponsor that follows in the footsteps of the League and will make the process open and transparent so that the candidates are not able to manipulate the presidential debates behind closed doors without paying a political price. If the campaigns are forced to look into the eyes of the American people and say, you can't ask follow-up questions, we're going to exclude a popular third-party candidate like a Ross Perot, they'd pay a political price, and because of that transparency, we'd have better debates. But
thanks, George.
Thank you for having me.
For more on the debate, the magazine's chief political correspondent, Matt Bai, is on the line from Washington. So Matt, let's talk about tonight's debate and how this might work. There's a challenge in a piece that you wrote this morning, really interesting piece you wrote this morning for Paul Ryan, sort of moving between his long avowed beliefs on taxation and Mitt Romney's statements on taxation in the last debate.
Yeah, Megan, hi, and thanks. Thanks for reading the column and editing. I appreciate it. You know, there's a couple of longtime tenets of conservative economic theory, the supply side theory that we associate with the Reagan era and beyond. One is that government should get less revenue than it does, that it should get smaller. Another is that the wealthy already pay more than their fair share of the overall tax burden, and therefore should, if anything, pay less. Mitt Romney disavowed both of those tenets flatly in the debate last week. He essentially said, I don't want to decrease the money coming to government at all. And I don't want to decrease the burden on the wealthy. I think they should continue to pay their fair share. If anything, I want to cut middle-class taxes. You know, Paul Ryan comes very strongly from that supply-side school. His strongest backers are very committed economic conservatives on the Hill and in the think tanks here in Washington. And I think it presents something of a dilemma for him. And I'm really interested watching to see whether he will fully support what Mitt Romney said or whether he'll try to walk it back in some way.
It's a really fascinating turnabout for Republicans. This has always been such a huge advantage for them with the electorate, which is that we're the party that's for tax cuts. And here you have Mitt Romney denying that he wants any big tax cuts. Is that just a shift in sort of what is acceptable to the public?
I think it's fascinating, and I think it does represent a shift in the political dynamic on the issue. I mean, look, for generations, right? As long as I've been alive and cognizant of campaigns.
And reporting on them, yeah.
The Republicans have wanted to cut taxes, and they've been on the offensive. I mean, the classic case is in 1984, where Walter Mondale said, he won't tell you the truth, I will, I'm going to raise your taxes. He won 13 electoral votes in that election, and everyone pretty much took away the same point about taxation from that point forward. Yeah, here you have the Republican nominee saying, no. Just because I'm going to cut all the marginal tax rates, let's not call that a tax cut, even though generally Republicans would call anything a tax cut. And you have the Democratic president, by the way, who extended tax cuts for the wealthy while he has been in office, saying, no, I'll stand against any tax cuts. So it does indicate to me that both parties have reached a feeling that the public has seen enough of this, particularly tax cuts for the wealthy, and that just offering more cuts in taxes and revenue, especially with the deficit being where it is, doesn't have the same political resonance that it did.
Now, Biden obviously has his challenges tonight, too. Clearly, Democrats at least want to see him be a lot more aggressive than the president was. But he's got to be passionate without being too hot, right?
He does. I mean, you know, people forget about the. I mean, first of all, there's a real irony about it because, of course, you've been hearing rumblings for a year, and particularly around Hillary Clinton. You know, why is Biden still on the ticket? Maybe it should be Hillary Clinton. What's he bringing to the ticket? Right. And now, of course, you know, by a weird twist of events, they're sort of counting on Biden to arrest the slide.
You know, clean up after the president.
I think, you know, what people forget, he does have to be controlled and disciplined, but people forget how good a debater he was in the 2007 primary season. I think most observers thought he won most of those debates in the Democratic primaries, and it was because he was so disciplined and so cognizant of the fact that he could ramble on and say some things that didn't sound quite right. And so I think he made a real effort to discipline himself as a candidate in those debates, and it really worked. And so I think, you know, he has a track record.
And it's a really interesting thing about the expectations game here, too, because Paul Ryan in the polls is expected to actually win this debate. And as you say, Biden's a very experienced debater, but has this kind of popular perception as being kind of a gaffe machine.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the gaffe machine being which one?
Being Joe Biden.
Biden. Yeah, I mean, Biden is perfectly capable of saying just head-scratching, strange stuff. The thing about Joe Biden is people kind of expect it. There's some context for it. He's a guy who speaks from the heart and often phrases things the wrong way. He's had some real whoppers over the last couple of years, but I think people sort of expect it from him, and that lessens the effect. You know, for Paul Ryan, look, he's I think going to be, you know, he's in command of policy, and he's going to be a good debater. I think that to me, looking at Ryan, the challenge is that he can be very grim in his countenance, right? He can seem a little angry and a little lecturing. There's not a lot of happy warrior. There's not a lot of cheerfulness or humor or levity there. That can play poorly on stage. And I think if I were Ryan's folks, the thing I'd be concerned about is not coming off as a lecturer, as a scold, but showing sort of the human side of him, which, by the way, is relatively evident when you sit with him one-on-one.
Here's one superficial question, Matt. I'm interested about the optics of their age difference. In recent years, this has actually sort of played to the advantage of the older vice presidential candidate. We had it with Lloyd Bentsen. We had it with Dick Cheney. Do you see that playing a role here at all?
Well, it's age, and it's also, it's also some measure of incumbency. I mean, Bentsen wasn't an incumbent, but he was a guy who'd been around a long time. I mean, it's, obviously a sitting vice president, someone who's been vice president has some advantage. But let's not make this mistake. I think, in my mind at least, Paul Ryan is not Dan Quayle, and he's not John Edwards. He's a guy who's has a deep command of policy, he's thought deeply about the issues, comes from a very strong place of conviction. If there's a danger for Ryan, it's in not mastering the material, but having such of a deep-seated core philosophy about it that he's formed for himself, that he could stray, as I said, as we start out talking about, he could stray from where the presidential nominee actually has put down a marker on some of these issues, which is considerably more moderate than the school that Paul Ryan emerges from.
Thanks, Matt.
Anytime. Thanks, Megan.
We have much more planned for tonight. We'll be live streaming the debate with fact-checking and analysis before and after from the Times Politics team. Please send us your questions using the hashtag AskNYT. It all gets underway here at 8:30 p.m. Before we go, a preview of an upcoming story by Sarah Wheaton. In the Show Me state, with a big Senate race between Claire McCaskill and Todd Akin, it turns out voters are even divided about their state's pronunciation. The candidates, of course, are trying to appeal to both camps.
I say Missouri. I say Missouri too. I say Missouri too.
Missouri or Missourians? Yeah.
Missouri, right?
Yeah.
And it drives you crazy when people say Missouri.
Missouri.
I have more fun saying Missouri, so I'm going to say it.
Because she knows I don't like it.
It might seem like an inconsequential debate, but some politicians running for office in Missouri, or Missouri, are making an effort to say it both ways. Senator Claire McCaskill, a Democrat running for re-election, usually says Missouri, and so does a narrator in her TV ads.
Claire McCaskill, family and Missouri first.
But sometimes the narrator emphasizes her Missouri roots.
Claire says, make it in Missouri.
And when her opponent, Todd Aiken, announced he was running, he mostly said Missouri, but threw in one Missouri.
Missouri has a choice of two futures.
But he quickly went back to Missouri.
Make sure that Missouri voters have an opportunity to exercise that choice.
People at Saturday's University of Missouri football game had competing theories about who in the state says Missouri.
The further south you get, it's Missouri down there.
I know a lot of older people that say Missouri as well.
Well, it's St. Louis, Missouri, but anywhere else in Missouri, it's Missouri.
I think it's a person-by-person thing.
Yeah. Why do people use Missouri and not Missouri?
That's Jay Nixon.
Jay Nixon, the incumbent governor running for re-election, is known to say both. During his inauguration speech in 2009, he split the difference.
All right here in Missouri. It's because here in Missouri, we go to work early and we stay late.
But his Republican opponent, Dave Spence, here on the left, is consistent.
I've always been a Missouri guy. Just because I'm running for political office, I'm just going to stick with my roots. I'm not going to pander and change it. But it's interesting across the state, and everybody has an opinion on it. But I guess I should have said Missouri.
The pronunciation debate has also bled into national politics. In March, when Mitt Romney was campaigning in St. Louis, he took a poll of the crowd.
How many say Missouri like I do? Okay, I'm in Missouri right now. I think we're going to Missouri a little later today, right? Yeah, we're going to be taking a trip over to Missouri.
President Obama, on the other hand, says Missouri. Most people we spoke to didn't seem to care how politicians say it, but some thought it was pandering when they said it both ways.
If you're trying to go both ways on the board, it's not working for me. You got to go one way or the other, and it's Missouri all the way.
I don't care about that. I care more about their policy.
No opinion about that. Well, it's kind of like a politician that stays center.
Yeah. I'm not big into politics, but I mean, it's a smart move.
That's all for today. Stay with us online for more on Campaign 2012. I'm Megan Lieberman. Thanks for watching.